Welcome to another episode of 3 Minute Therapy Podcast with Dr. Michael Edelstein. That's me. I'm a clinical psychologist and author, and Dr. David Ramsey Steele, who's a writer and author and has many other achievements. Today, we're going to be discussing relationships and how to diagnose whether your relationship is doomed, but more importantly, how to improve your relationship. I also want to mention that Chris Rossini is our technician, for which we're greatly indebted. Well, there are many problems that I see with couples that come up in relationships. And a large part of it is ineffective or poor communication between each other. And it's not that unusual when in the first session I teach them better communication strategies, it turns everything around. So let's get into some things you can do in your relationship. And much of this also applies to any relationship with your kids, your parents, work relationships, casual relationships, if you'd like to try to improve them. The first thing I would mention is an idea from John Gottman, the relationship author, who wrote the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And this he calls the 5-to-1 ratio. And what that means is relationships tend to work better when you have at least 5 positive interactions to every 1 negative interaction. And positive interactions could include appreciation, admiration, approval. They could be verbal as well as nonverbal. And the more, the better, as long as it's genuine. Don't make things up out of whole cloth, but at least find some truth in your positive feedback. Ken Blanchard has an idea related to that. He's the author of The 1-Minute Manager, which was on the New York Times bestseller list for many months. And he says at work relationships, catch your employees doing something right and praise them for their efforts, rather than what usually happens is catching them doing something wrong and then criticize them. Now, in the 5-to-1, the 1 is negative, constructive criticism or constructive feedback that's not positive. And that's important for a nurturing relationship also, because there's obviously going to be things that are problems in a relationship, and it's important to be aware of those and discuss them with your partner and try to improve those. David, did you have any thoughts about the 5-to-1?
Where did the magic number 5 come from?
Why not 4? Good question.
4-to-1.
And that John Gottman says the magic number 5-to-1 came from observing couples behind the one-way mirror and counting the positive to the negative interactions and following the relationships over the next 5 years. And he claims that the relationships that he observed 5-to-1, 5 positive to 1 negative, lasted beyond 5 years, and the ones that had a poorer ratio did not last that long.
Well, that sounds very reassuring. That sounds quite solid.
Yes. And try it in your relationships and see if it improves things dramatically. And right. The positives could be very simple things like, good morning, it's good to see you, or I like that shirt you're wearing, or do you remember 15 years ago what fun we had on that cruise? So it could, these positive utterances of feedback could be very wide ranging. Another item that you can put on your list if you want to list ways to improve your relationship is the best way to make a request. And I give the couples I work with this formula: I prefer X, how do you feel? Which means X is whatever you prefer, and then engaging your partner in the discussion by asking them, how do they feel? Now, I've worked with couples who at first were saying what they prefer, but then they don't engage the person in a discussion about it. And what sometimes happens is their partner listens, and now they know what you prefer, but there's no action item involved. So how do you feel gets them to either make a commitment or express their dislike of what you suggest, and then you can have a discussion to work on it. Any suggestions about that one, David?
No, that sounds very sensible.
Okay, now another one which is more difficult than the first two for couples that I've worked with is I call be forward looking, not backward looking. So if you have a problem with your partner and you want to discuss it, it's second nature to start by saying, last night you didn't wash the dishes. I've been washing the dishes for the last 3 weeks. It's about time you wash the dishes. I prefer you wash the dishes. But that introduction, the negative introduction discussing the past, really doesn't help. What helps is just saying what you want. If you just say, I would prefer you do the dishes tonight, I'll do the dishes tomorrow night, and we alternate in the future. How do you feel about that? Then that's as effective or even more effective than listing the depredations from the past of your partner. So just state what you want, not what went wrong. And if you start by stating what went wrong, then you could get into an endless argument of bickering. I did wash the dishes last week. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. And that tends to just lead to the discussion going down the drain. So be forward looking, not backward looking when you bring up problems and possible solutions. Another item is schedule a regular discussion with your partner to discuss how the relationship is going. I call that a regularly scheduled relationship discussion, RSRD. And most couples I work with find doing it once a week at the same day, same time for at least a few minutes is very constructive, even if they feel that there was no problems for the last week. Just stating a few of the things that went right that you were pleased with would be important, because again, we're going for that positive feedback. David, did you have any thoughts about the regularly scheduled relationship discussion or the be forward looking, not backward looking?
Well, I very much agree with the forward looking, not backward looking. I think one of the dangers of increased communication is that things are dragged up that are best forgotten. Not everything that happened is worth shining the light on. And it's certainly best to look ahead rather than to go back over what happened 6 months ago.
That's right. And I could add here that John Gottman found that there are different relationship styles. And what may seem counterintuitive is he said some couples actually work better by not discussing problems in the relationship, by just sweeping it under the rug. They don't discuss it and they just ignore it. And then the relationship just moves on. So if that works better for you and your partner, not discussing these things, then the things we're recommending doesn't really apply. But with most couples that I've worked with, sweeping it under the rug has been rare. Another important one is when you talk about solutions, focus on solutions that uniquely work for you and your partner. It's common for someone to bring up a possible solution and the other one says that's not reasonable or that's not fair. The issue really isn't what's reasonable or what's fair or what most people would do, but rather what works for the two of you. So just as a just as an extreme example, if you want your partner to write "I love my spouse" 1,000 times to redress uh, a poor treatment, and they're willing to do it, it works for them, and you feel uh, the problem has been redressed or restituted, then that's fine, even if half the world or most of the world thinks that doesn't make sense. David, any thoughts there?
That's right. I mean, all couples are unique and they all have their individual peculiarities.
Okay, very good. And also, John Gottman emphasizes very much what he calls the three turnings: turning toward, turning away, and turning against. So what he says is when your partner talks to you, they're making a bid for communication, and the best response is to turn toward or answer the bid in kind, and that's called turning toward. So, for example, your partner says, "It's another cold day," and you say, "Yes, I know. It seems like we've had a cold winter." Then that's turning toward. But if you say to your partner, "It's another cold day," and your partner says, "I wonder who's going to win the football game today," then that's turning away. You're not responding in kind. And the worst thing is what he calls turning against. You say, "It's another cold day," and your partner says, "Why are you so concerned with petty things like the weather? Why don't you put your mind on more important things?" So that would be turning against. So try to turn toward and respond to what your partner says, even saying something like "uh-huh" or "I understand" or "okay" is turning toward, because you're indicating that you heard your partner, you're listening, and that makes the connection. David, any thoughts about
what about a non-committal response, like, "So that's what you think"?
I think that's a good question. And I think the answer is he has gradations of turning toward. So that would probably, so that's what you think probably would be turning toward, because you are responding in kind, but it's not a strong turning toward, but it is turning toward. So at least you did that. And a stronger one would be to say, "Oh, so that's what you think. I agree," or "That's what you think. I don't see it that way. Let's discuss it." Those kinds of turning towards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes.
And then finally, from REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, which the 3 Minute Therapy podcast and the book 3 Minute Therapy that David and I co-authored is all about, is called Unconditional Other Acceptance. There are three types of acceptance: unconditional self-acceptance, unconditional other acceptance, and unconditional acceptance of your situation, the world, the universe. And unconditional other acceptance means no matter how poorly your partner treats you, you recognize through all that they're not bad people, they're not idiots, they're not crazy. They're just imperfect humans who act imperfectly, and you don't like what they're doing, but that's no reason to condemn them, their essence, their personhood. So unconditional other acceptance, UOA. David?
No, I agree. It's absolutely vital, especially that you accept the universe.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. and accept yourself too. I think all three are vital. And I've noticed with clients, some people have more problems with one than the other. Some people are pretty other accepting, but put themselves down a lot, or vice versa, or just have a problem with unconditional acceptance of their situations or how they feel, or the state of the world and those kinds of things. So this focuses mainly on unconditional other acceptance. Okay, and if you want to get a copy of this, I have this article called 7 Ways to Improve Your Relationship and 7 Communication Ways to Improve Your Relationship in Psychology Today blog. And I'm known there as the 3-minute therapist. Well, thank you very much for watching. And if you have any thoughts or comments, please comment below. Please give us a like if you found any part of this valuable. Throw a tip into the Patreon hat tip jar and come back for our next episode in approximately a week to stay on the rational side of life.